Well, good evening, everyone. I'm really glad that you could make it. This is quite an experiment that we're doing tonight, live streaming via Zoom of a garden tour. So I'm hoping it works out well. I hope you'll let us know afterwards if it was worth doing this way, or if not, let us know that too. So a couple of things. One is that this is being recorded, so it'll be available afterwards and to share with other people that couldn't make it tonight. And secondly, for questions, we're going to, you can go ahead and type questions into the Q&A box section during the program, and then I will answer those questions afterwards. So let's get started. So in 2012, I decided that I was going to change all our landscaping to native plants. Now, those of you who are not familiar with native plants, you should know that these plants are the plants that were here before the European settlers came. In other words, these plants evolved here over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And because of that, they are perfectly adapted to our soils, our light conditions, our moisture conditions. They are just perfectly adapted to growing where they are here, which means that they don't need any fertilizer. And once they're established, they don't need to be watered. They're just perfectly fine on their own. So there's so many benefits of native plants. But one of them is this, that when I started this whole process, and I gradually put plants in gardens, and in 2014, August of 2014, I started to put in this little garden alongside the driveway here. And during that week that I was digging that out and putting it in, it rained. And I noticed that the rain collected on our driveway and rolled down here and came down to this one particular spot and just puddled up there before it continued running on down through the driveway and into the street and eventually into the storm sewer. So I noticed that, and I wondered if I was able to dig a little trench, if I could indeed route that water off into a garden and make it a rain garden. And I found out that that just worked perfectly. So I dug out this area at the bottom part of this garden, and I dug several holes to test the ability of the soil to absorb the water. And I found out that in an 8-inch hole about the diameter of a paint bucket, that it took about 12 hours for that water to totally absorb into the ground. But it did absorb. So that meant that it was perfectly suited to be a rain garden. Now, a rain garden, the idea of a rain garden is that we collect the water, the rainfall, and runoff into a low spot that's either naturally existing or that we make that by digging it out. And we use native plants in these gardens to help the water infiltrate into the ground slowly, rather than gushing out into the storm sewers and native plants are just perfect for this because so many of them have deep, deep roots. Many of these root systems will go down 10, 15 feet or more. And what happens as a result of that is that these roots create channels in the ground for the water to get into the ground quickly. And in the ground, it's filtered. So all those pollutants that got caught in the rain out of the air, and all the pollutants and chemicals that maybe came from runoff, those are all filtered out of the water, making the water clean before it eventually makes its way into the waterways and the rivers and the lake and ultimately our drinking water. And the second thing that these huge deep root systems do is that most of these native plants are perennials, meaning that they grow up every year, and then they, in the winter or the fall, they die back to the ground, and then the next year they come back. But every year, about 30% of the root mass dies off. And what that's doing is creating organic matter in the soil, and it's eventually turning the soil into a huge sponge where that water can also be absorbed and held in the ground to gradually seep out again into the waterways. So this section of this garden is our rain garden. Probably the most dramatic plant that you're looking at right now is the tall, spiky purple blue flowers, and that's dense blazing star. This is a real common plant, real popular in our sacred grounds projects because it is so dramatic, and also it just attracts a lot of butterflies and bees and other pollinators. I forgot to mention earlier when I was talking about the importance of native plants is that all our wildlife depends on these plants because they co-evolved with them literally over those thousands and thousands of years. So our native plants are just really, really good at supporting wildlife. That's why in the Sacred Grounds projects we call that we're building wildlife habitat. So anyway, right now we're looking at this dense blazing star. This is kind of cool because these spiky flowers are growing along this spike, and they start blossoming at the top. And as those flowers fade out, then they continue blossoming as they go down that stem. So that's a pretty cool plant. And another plant that we use a lot in our rain gardens is New England aster. And here you see in this dark area down here, let me see if I can get a better angle on it. This is a New England aster plant. And frankly, we were gone for 3 weeks on vacation, and we came back and we saw all this down brown dead leaves on the New England aster. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think I ought to cut those back or cut them down before we go on giving this garden tour. And then I noticed that the New England aster was starting to grow out the top and provide some new growth there. So these plants are really important, providing nectar in the fall, especially for the migrating monarch butterflies. So I thought I ought to leave those there and let them go. And it looks like that they're going to be okay. Another plant that we use a lot is this one where the flowers are almost all gone. But right here, these flowers, that is wild bergamot. It's also often called bee balm, not to be confused with the native bee balm that is native to another part of the state. This has these purple flowers, and you often see the red flowers, also called bee balm. Those actually are native plants to another part of the state. Black-eyed Susan, the yellow flower here, is another plant that we use a lot in our plantings. It's just really blooms nicely and lasts for a long time. Now, here's some interesting thing is this yellow or orange flower that you see here is butterfly milkweed. And most of you will probably know that milkweed is one of the plants that the monarch butterfly depends on. The caterpillar of the monarch butterfly has to have milkweed. There's no other plant that the caterpillars can eat. And most of our butterfly milkweed in our yard is all done blooming, but these have a few blossoms left here. So, and it's interesting to me is that butterfly milkweed is really happiest in sandy soil. But we're in Perrysburg here. We have this rock hard clay, and yet these plants are doing okay here. Probably not the happiest that they could be, but they're thriving. So they're supporting monarch caterpillars when the monarchs lay the eggs on these plants. I had an interesting experience with the butterfly milkweed in another part of the yard that I planted one year, and they grew well that year, but they disappeared the next year, and they were gone the next year, and the fourth year, I guess that's the fourth year, they pop back up. So sometimes things will just disappear and then come back later on. Now, I'm also noticing down in deep into the rain garden here, you can just start to see the blue flag iris that bloomed earlier is forming seed pods here right now. So hopefully I'm going to be able to collect some of those seeds to grow plants, some more plants later on. Let me move a little bit around here. This plant with the interesting seed pod or seeds forming is golden Alexanders. And that's an interesting thing because this is the plant that is the host plant for the eastern black swallowtail. Now, I mean host plant, that's the plant that the caterpillar eats. Now, most of you may know the eastern black swallowtail caterpillar is often found on dill and fennel in the vegetable gardens. But the actual native plant, the native host plant, is golden Alexanders. And it blooms earlier in the year, and it has a really bright yellow flower. So right now it's totally gone to seed. And you can see these, hopefully you can see the seed heads here that are formed. And if you have golden Alexanders, you're going to be able to give away a lot of golden Alexanders because it likes to seed prolifically, and you'll find them popping up all over the place. Oh, look at this. This little flower down here is nodding onion. And here you can see why we call it nodding. These haven't quite bloomed, but you can see that you can see they're drooping down, and when they start to blossom, they'll come back standing up. And I found this a really interesting plant when I visited a friend's garden the other day. Rick Barraclough was using nodding onion as a border along his garden. You can see those leaves down at the bottom are thick, and he plants them as a border that he can just mow his grass right up to the edge of that without much trouble. I'm going to try that in a different part of the yard, in a different part of the garden. Here's a better picture of nodding onion in full bloom right there. So let's move around a little bit more. I'm going to try and move the camera slowly so I don't overwhelm the bandwidth that we've got. In case I see that I'm going to move quickly, I may say, close your eyes, because I don't want to make you dizzy as I move around here. Here's an interesting part of this golden Alexander. These leaves have turned red, and the other leaves on the other plants haven't done that yet. I found some goldfinch out here picking at these seeds today. Now here's some New England aster that is doing much better than the other ones. It didn't have those brown leaves problems. And this is so important. Our asters and goldenrods are so important for providing nectar for the bees and butterflies in the fall. But particularly the New England aster and other asters are providing just the right amount of nutrition, just the right amount of lipids or fats for the migrating monarch butterfly. And the monarch has to gain weight as it goes on that 2,000-mile journey to Mexico, where it overwinters. Can you imagine flying 2,000 miles and gaining weight? You need a lot of the proper nutrition. Now, another plant that's in here is obedient plant. And it's just getting ready to bloom, and this will bloom, unlike the dense blazing star, it's going to bloom from the bottom up. And it has really nice lavender flowers on it. Now, warning about obedient plant, some say, oh, it's not so obedient because it does like to spread. So it's starting to push some other things out here, and I'll be pulling it out of there. Now we're moving along here, the other side of the garden. And I just wanted you to see that there's this rain garden that we're talking about. It's interesting to me that when we get 1 inch of rain, just 1 inch of rain, there's approximately 587 gallons of water that come down that driveway and go into this rain garden. So that's 587 gallons that's kept out of, that is filtered, and 587 gallons that's kept out of the rain, out of the storm sewers. So I forgot to tell you that when the rain goes through this little trench here into the garden, if by chance there's so much water it can't go in, it can't get into that trench and flows further down the driveway, it runs into a little lip of concrete where our driveway meets the curb. And then it flowed, I dug out a trench so that water also flows into the rain garden. Now, the first couple years of this rain garden, we would get some rains when we would get a lot of rain, and it would overflow. I mean, the garden couldn't keep up with it. So the water, excess water, would flow out into the street. Now, and then into the storm sewer that's behind me. Now what happens, just 6 years later, I haven't seen it in the last couple years overflow at all. This absorbs the water so fast that it rarely, if ever, overflows out into the street. Now, you may have seen a picture of me standing out in the driveway with an umbrella. This so intrigues me, this process of watching the water run into this rain garden where I know it's being treated naturally. And I turn around and look in the street and I see the water just gushing down the street into the storm sewer. It really tickles me a lot. Now, I did want to show you that we have that rain garden here, and we also have another garden on the left of it. And we have this path going through here. And so that gives people an idea that this is on purpose. You know, they may not know, if we're just left things to go all by themselves, they may think it's not a tended and cared for garden. But by doing something like this, and also putting a sign up, this is a Monarch way station sign, it gives them a better appreciation that these gardens are tended. And I wanted to show you this white, there's some more nodding onion that is snuck into this part of the garden. These gardens are pretty dynamic because you can put a plant in one place and a few years later you'll find it growing up in some other places as well. Now, this white flower that we're looking at right here is Virginia mountain mint. And this is such a neat plant. I don't know if you can see on this video the enormous amount of activity that's going on here. I'm looking at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bumblebees that are on this section right now. There's a couple of honeybees in here as well. This plant just draws in the pollinators like crazy. And if you have a vegetable garden, you want to use native plants around your vegetable garden because all the pollinators that they bring in will actually, science shows this, will actually increase the harvest and abundance that you get out of your vegetable garden. There's even some anecdotal evidence that says even the nutrition quality of the vegetables are better if they're insect pollinated. Now, this is kind of a miracle plant in my opinion, because this plant brings in not only so many pollinators, but also beneficial insects to help to keep other insects under control. And so that's a nice feature to have in the vegetable garden. Now, a lot of people are a little scared of or nervous about bees and flying insects that sting. So in North America, we have over 4,000 native bee species. And it doesn't matter where you are in the country, wherever you put your foot down, in that area, you're going to have between 200 and 400 native bee species. And what's so much fun for me to realize is that most of those don't have stingers. And most of the ones that do have stingers, they're so small, they can't even puncture your skin. Today, well, it was really yesterday, I was standing out here and I was looking at a tiny little bug on a flower, and I picked up this flower to look at it a little closer. And one of our bumblebees landed right on top of the flower, grabbed some pollen or nectar and took off. Totally was not concerned about me at all. So this is really, really important. So all of our native plants are good, or a lot of them are really strong pollinator attractors. Now, when we think about pollination, you know, most of us have probably heard that over a third of our food, 1 out of 3 bites of food that we take every day, comes to us from pollination. But in addition to that, over 90% of our plants are insect pollinated. And every living animal either eats plants or eats things that eat plants. So this is really, native plants are really the base of the food web. And we're included in that list of animals that eat plants or eat things that eat plants. So this is really, really important. And as I pan up the street, let me just pan up here and look up our street a little bit. You can see that there is a lot of lawn in here. So instead of those deep, deep roots, we have landscapes that have lawns that have only a few inches of roots in them. So there's a lot of water that runs off of those lawns, and there's not a lot of infiltration into the ground cleaning our water. And these lawns require an awful lot of maintenance. In addition, as we look up the street, we see Colorado blue spruce, Norway maple, and a whole lot of other non-native plants in the landscape that are doing absolutely nothing to help our environment. So, you know, as we learn about this and we start to take care of our own properties and take care of the earth by planting the proper landscapes, we have an obligation not only to do that, but we also have an obligation to help educate other people. So that's one of the things that Sacred Grounds is all about, is helping to demonstrate and to educate the importance of these plants and gardening for wildlife. So let's continue on here a little bit. So this is the mountain mint. And actually for pollinators and to promote bees and other pollinators, you want to make sure you have plants that are blooming throughout the growing season, because these pollinators need not only during one little part of the year, but they need that nutrition all year. And then as the ones that are going to overwinter, they need that nutrition as well to overwinter. I was so hoping that we were going to have more of the wild bergamot blooming. There's just a little bit of it blooming because there's a really cool animal that is so common around the wild bergamot plant. And that is one of the moths that we have that flies during the day, and that's called a clear wing hummingbird moth. And it's so cool to watch because you'd think it was a hummingbird the way it flies up and approaches the flower. But as it approaches the flower, its proboscis, you know, that tongue-like structure, actually unfurls in flight. And then by the time it gets up to the flower, its proboscis is straight enough that it can insert it into those flower tubes and get the nectar, all the while hovering all that time. It's just really, really cool. If you have a patch of wild bergamot in bloom, you are very likely to see that. This yellow flower that just snuck into the picture is gray-headed coneflower. And I really like these drooping petals on this flower. This can get fairly aggressive too. If you have some of these, you're going to have some that you can give away. And that's one of the things that we do in Sacred Grounds and also in our Wild Ones organization, we actually share these plants with each other. So there's usually a lot of plants available. Let me swing around here. I wanted to show you why it's called gray-headed coneflower. You might close your eyes for a second and I'll swing real quick. Okay, you can open them again. You can see the gray after it's gone to seed, the petals have dropped off and the gray forms on there. So let me move along a little bit more. Oh, here is the seeds developing on a plant that we use a lot. It blooms in the late spring. This is foxglove beard tongue, or Penstemon digitalis. And these seeds, I really like the way these seeds look. And you can harvest these seeds and grow more plants from them. It is really, really, really an attractive flower. And here I see that as I'm moving along, I saw this blue flower here on this stalk. This is actually one of our native annuals. This is a tall bellflower, and it seeds pretty prolifically. And it likes, we have a lot of them growing in the shade. Most of our yard is in shade, but we find these popping up all over the place. And usually they're covered with tiny little insects. So moving along here, up the driveway, we have another section here, which is the result of a plant rescue that we did of somebody that whose mother had a lot of native plants growing around their house, and she no longer wanted them. So we went and dug them all up. And I stuck some of them in here, so it's kind of a potpourri of things. This it's in the shade now, but the tallest one here is one of our ironweeds. I don't know if you can see that. And this really has a strong, those flowers open it up, it'll be a deep, deep purple. This has a really strong root structure, and it breaks through the clay pretty well. Oh, cool. Here's another plant that I was hoping I'd get to show you. This right here is bottle brush grass. Doesn't that look just like a bottle brush? And this also grows very a lot in our shade in the clumps. Producing a group of those is pretty interesting. So there's some more Virginia mountain mint in here. Back my way out of here. I found an early blooming goldenrod in here. Usually goldenrod is, along with the asters, bloom in the fall. And this one, this particular species, I don't see it right now, is actually blooming in the summer. This purplish plant that we see right there is Joe Pieweed. It grows fairly tall, so it's good to put them in parts of the garden where you can have really tall plants. And here's some more of the butterfly milkweed. This is all done blooming, but I thought I saw a seed pod forming on one of these already this year. I don't see it right now. But anyway, there's just a whole bunch of different plants in here. Oh, here's cool. I'm going to right down to the ground here. A plant that came in is wild strawberry. You can see it right here. So this is our native strawberry, and it does flower and produce fruit. And you'll be hard pressed to beat any animals to the fruit when it forms. And here's a great example thing that I really like to notice is that you see these strawberry leaves here are actually showing signs of animals eating these leaves. And that's what's supposed to happen. That's the purpose of these plants, is to provide nutrition to the rest of the food web. And that proves that that's happening. moving along here, we have a section of this driveway that is underneath some huge spruce trees. I think these are Norway spruce, and they were here when we moved here. There were actually 3 of them, and one of them died. So my plan is when they die, we'll replace them with native plants. But it's pretty hard to find things that grow underneath spruce evergreen trees like this with all the needles. And our landscape designer helped find this. And this what might make you scream, oh no, invasive plant, but this is our native honeysuckle. This is northern bush honeysuckle, also called dwarf honeysuckle. And I was really nervous about this, afraid that it was going to be invasive. But in the first couple of years that it was here, I saw no evidence of anything using this plant for food. And finally, last year, I started to notice that some of the leaves were being eaten. And again, that proves to me that this is part of the food web that we're trying to support. This plant has yellow flowers on it. It grows low to the ground like this, usually. And it has a little bit of teeth on the edges of the leaf, as opposed to all the other honeysuckle around our neighborhood, which are smooth edges on the leaves and also bloom with white flowers. We kind of live in a honeysuckle farm, I say, because the neighbors and a lot of properties along River Road here actually treat their invasive honeysuckle like specimen plants. They mulch them and take good care of them. So here's another section of off the driveway where there's just kind of a smattering of different plants. Now close your eyes because I'm going to pop across the driveway real quick. Okay, we're on the other side of the driveway now. You can open your eyes. So here's some black-eyed Susans that are starting to crowd out what was really here and what I really like to see, because this plant is the only plant that a specific butterfly those caterpillars can eat, and these are violets. So in the spring, this is a magnificent display of blue flowers. But, also, we have fritillary butterflies around the yard. I think that are using these. Here you can see some of these leaves are being eaten, perhaps by the caterpillars of the fritillary butterflies. So I'm going to move along quickly here along our front walk. And this is what I call a hot mess right now. It looks like that because I think it is a hot mess. But anyway, it's a hot mess kind of on purpose, because what we had in here were arborvitae, which were non-native. And we took those out and put in 9-bark shrubs. And one of them really thrived magnificently. One of them just kind of hung in there, and the others died. So I grew some from seed and put them back, planted them into this area under the eave here along the front side of the garage. And all sorts of things started to pop up in here. While I thought I'll just let these grow as I'm waiting for the 9-bark to fill in. And the 9-bark is starting to come along and come through the rest of the plants. So as those begin to take over, I'll thin out the other things. But in the meantime, there's some interesting things. So here's some more of that tall bellflower. And here I found this, a volunteer swamp milkweed. Yesterday, I didn't even notice it before that. What caught my eye on this is that there were maybe 30 caterpillars on this, but they weren't monarch butterfly caterpillars. They were milkweed tussock moth caterpillars, and these are pretty cool. They look like a little skein of multicolored yarn, and they were just munching away these leaves. I thought I'd get to show them to you today, but you might be able to see that they stripped off this stem here, and they're gone today. What happened to them, I don't know. Hopefully some birds came along and ate them and contributed more to the food web. So in here we've got some thimbleweed. This is done blooming now, but it's starting to go to seed. So that's the thimbleweed growing in there. And we've got another neat plant popped up in here. It's related to cardinal flower, but this is great blue lobelia. And it just came up in here as a volunteer. There's some more of the nine bark thriving. Here's the original nine bark, which has just really enjoyed itself here. It's totally done blooming now, and here's one of the seed heads on it. Oh my gosh. As I looked down at the ground, I saw something that I have to stop and deal with, because this is one of the non-native honeysuckle bushes. So I'm going to pull this out of the ground. It's easy to pull out because the roots are so shallow. I'll put that aside to deal with later. But I must pull 10 honeysuckle seedlings out every day. And here's another volunteer swamp milkweed that came along. And this is growing right underneath the black walnut tree. We've got a lot of things growing under the black walnuts. So I'm just letting that grow here because I found some monarch eggs and monarch caterpillars on it. So I'm going to hop onto the other side of the sidewalk here and show you some challenges that I had. Here's some, it's not a challenge, but the tall bellflower is growing handsomely here. And here's some more thimbleweed. Now in this area, I had a big patch of purple coneflower that it was just blooming magnificently. And it just started to crowd out other things, and I forgot about them and didn't even know that they were doing that. So and also another plant called brown-eyed Susan. So I thinned a lot of them out this year, and so I'm working on this section right here to fill in some other things. But I found out that we had planted this is wild quinine. And as I thinned out the purple coneflower, I found out some more that we had planted there. One of my favorite plants, I don't know how many times I've said that, my favorite plant, but this is rattlesnake master. Look at that cool flower head. This is almost done blooming, but has these spiky globes on it. And I found out that the purple coneflower was crowding those out too, so I made room for that. You'll see some black tubing around every once in a while and some spray heads. We had an underground sprinkler system in when we moved in, and back in the day when I was doing cultivars and all sorts of non-native plants, we hooked it up with a drip system to take care of watering those. Now I just use it to water new native plants I'm putting in to make sure they get established. But I put some wild strawberries in here to see if they'll work as a ground cover. So there's some rattlesnake master. And in this little section is a little blue stem, which is one of our native prairie grasses. And this is one of those plants that sends the roots down very, very deep. But this will grow about 3 feet tall when conditions are right. And I really love this in the fall. It turns a bronzy color. And when it's sticking up through the snow and the wind's blowing, I think it's really quite attractive. So people can use this. I've seen like the metro parks use this as a border along some playgrounds. Coming around the front, we've got some plants that are probably better suited to sand. This plant in the front here is a shrub called Calm St. John's wort. And it's doing okay, and it's actually seeds itself, and some seedlings pop up. But I had to thin the gray-headed coneflower back and found some more of them growing in the back here. The other thing that we have a problem with in our area is deer and rabbits. So I found, after a lot of trial, I built a lot of cages, put them around plants, and what I found worked best for us was a spray called liquid fence for deer and rabbits. And so after using it under a specific regimen, now down to once a month. It works pretty well, but still I have to protect some things from the rabbits. I'm trying to grow some asters in this section. I forgot to tell you something I wanted to show you happened to us with the purple coneflower. There's a weevil, and I forget its exact name, but what it does is it cuts the flower head off. You can see really, really sharp. And the last couple years, what it did was attack them after the flowers bloom. So we really still had a magnificent display of flowers. This year, what happened is that these weevils actually attacked the flowers before they bloom. So what's blooming in here now is kind of the second shot at this. So we'll see what happens along with that. So here's some more bellflower growing in there with some bergamot. I can see I'm running out of time here. So as we look back on here's how the front of our house looks at this point with these plants in here. Along the driveway, this section is always a challenge because for some reason the tall plants want to keep growing in here, and I bring them out every year. I thin these down because I want low growing plants along the driveway, but here they come, and they usually are so colorful and loaded with pollinators and other interesting insects that I just can't bear to take them out till they're done. Here's some more mountain mint. And the deer will come through here and munch on some things and leave a path through here like this. Here's an interesting plant that there's been some discussion about whether this is really what I think it is, but this is yellow wild indigo. It's kind of a shrubby plant, and it forms these seed pods. The yellow flowers on it aren't all that spectacular, but these black seed pods are pretty cool. Here's another Penstemon digitalis foxglove beard tongue. This was just a volunteer that decided to just pop up here. And another plant that I just found the other day is growing right here. This plant is boneset. And that's a good plant for a rain garden too, because it really likes a little bit of moisture, but it's popped up in this section of the garden. I don't know why it thought it was going to be happy there, but it seems to like it. So some other things, whenever I put a new plant in, I'll often put a flag there so I know where it is and can better identify it. So these little purple flowers here are blue vervain, another really good plant for a rain garden. And I thought I was putting in hoary vervain, which likes a little drier conditions than blue vervain, but it turned out it was blue vervain that I put in. Now here's this section from the other side. I showed you where I had to thin it out and get rid of all the brown-eyed Susan and the purple coneflower. So I'm working on that. There's some little blue stem right there. And this is an interesting plant. Oh, along this walkway in the spring is just loaded with wild columbine. And that's a yellow and red flower that, oh, I can't believe this. Here's one that's just about done. I mean, it shouldn't be here at this time, but here it is still. So it was just a riot of these wild columbine. And what we have here are some shrubby plants growing in. This is coralberry. And when I first saw the fruit on this thing, I thought this could not possibly be a native plant because it's so gaudy. The berries that form on it are this bright pink coral color. And I often think that our native plants, well, they can be very colorful, that they're not as shocking as the coralberry is. So I think what we'll do right now is I'll end the tour and we'll talk about any questions. I'll try and address any questions that you have. So I think either Manja or
I'm here, Hal. Sorry about that. Hello,
no
everyone. Hi, my name is Manja Holland. I'm actually joining you all today from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I oversee our habitat and education programs for the National Wildlife Federation's Great Lakes region. So normally I'm based out of Ann Arbor. And I work with Hal and the Sacred Grounds Toledo team on our Sacred Grounds work. So I am just here today to help with the questions. Thank you for the wonderful tour, Hal, and thank you all of you for joining today. The question that I see here, Hal, is where can we find these plants? So where can people purchase native plants or find native plants in the Toledo area?
Great question. And it's been getting easier, fortunately, because people are getting more and more educated about the benefits of native plants and the importance of them. So one of the nurseries is Popping Up Natives. And they're on the Sacred Grounds website or on the Wild Ones website, we've got a list of all the sources of native plants. But Popping Up Natives is a full-time nursery. They don't have an actual site that you can go visit, but you can contact them. And again, you can look up that information on our website. Ben Sell's greenhouse in Toledo, I think they're on Door or Bancroft, also has a lot of native plants that you can get. At various times of the year, there's a plant sale. I think it was, we had to do it online plant sale this year, but Green Ribbon Initiative and Wild Ones and some metro parks got together and made plants available to the public. So that's another way to do it. But I'd refer you to the website. The Wild Ones website has a list of them, and I think it might also be on the Sacred Grounds Toledo Facebook page. But if you have any further problem, just email us and we'll get you that information. Good question.
Thanks, Hal. And yeah, I would say that another place to check is the Sacred Grounds Toledo website or webpage, which is on the Rain Garden Initiative website. I think that we usually try to keep that updated as well with events and plant sales. So Hal, another question just came in. Are there other opportunities to learn about native plants?
Oh, I love that question. Yes, indeed there are. And the first one, the premier one that I'm going to focus you on is the Wild Ones organization. We have over 4,000 members nationally, and in the Toledo chapter, the Oak Openings region chapter, we have a very, very active group, and it's dedicated. Wild Ones is dedicated. The mission is to educate people about the many benefits of growing wildflowers and other native plants in our landscapes. So I look into Wild Ones. Go to the Wild Ones website and sign up for our newsletter. We publish a monthly electronic newsletter, and which has a lot of information in it. And also on the website, we have a lot of information. Once we are allowed to get back together, and it's a good thing to do to get back together face to face, Wild Ones has monthly meetings with programs that teach all about native plants, all sorts of different things. Also, we have some Zoom sessions coming up. Go to the Wild Ones Facebook page and you'll see a program that is being sponsored by our national organization. Heather Holm, who is an award-winning speaker and author, is doing a program, I think next month in September, and there's 1,000 Zoom seats available. So go there and sign up. The last one we had last month, those 1,000 seats filled up in a hurry, and it's free, but she's incredible. And you'll learn an awful lot about, I think it's going to be about bumblebees. I think Kim just posted something about the actual email address and the Facebook page and web address for you to hook into.
Great, thank you, Hal. And if anyone else has any additional questions, please go ahead and enter those into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Looks like we have another question here from Jessica. What parts of your garden are sunny versus shady? And is the rain garden by the driveway full sun?
It's, yes, the rain garden is full sun, but I think 3/4 of our property is shade. This part that I'm showing you right now gets probably 1/3 of the day in full sun. This one over here, probably about the same. This section off of the rain garden gets sun for most of the day. But I'm going to show you that we live in this wooded, mostly wooded lot, and we have a lot of shade that we live in. And maybe another presentation sometime will be about the shade plants that we have, because there are so many plants that grow in the shade. It's funny that I used to think that nothing grew in the shade, but when you think about it, that there's really plants that, native plants that grow in every single condition that there is. There are plants growing in the shade before we got here and said, oh, plants need fertilizer and all this other stuff, and nothing grows in the shade. In fact, you can maybe see some of the tall bellflowers blooming in here right now. But there's some wonderful, wonderful plants that grow in the shade. I don't know if that answered your question or not. We have a woods in our backyard, so I'd say 3/4 of our property is shade, either light shade or deep shade. And our lot is probably about 3/4 of an acre. They don't talk about acreage here in the subdivisions, but that's about what we've got.
Thank you, Hal. We've got a couple more questions. One from Thomas. Do you worry about poisonous plants?
Good question. I don't worry about poisonous plants. We do have some poison ivy growing here, and poison ivy is a native plant, and it's actually an important native plant for a lot of wildlife species. Whenever I see it growing in the front yard or in the gardens, I will dig it up and get it out of here. If you're talking about toxicity of plants, some plants are toxic, and you wouldn't want to eat them. So you wouldn't want to just go out and pluck plants here and put them in your salad. But I don't particularly worry about any plants that we have here. I haven't, in the gardening that I've done, I haven't run into getting any rashes from the plants that we've got.
Thanks, Hal. We have another question. Are there workshops to attend to learn more?
Absolutely. Again, I'd refer you to Wild Ones. And also, our Sacred Grounds program is going to have a virtual workshop. I think that's on August 18th. So go to our Sacred Grounds website and sign up for that. I believe the first 40 people that sign up will get a voucher for native plants. I think the voucher's $40 or $50 value. So the first 40 people. So that's going to be, I think, about an hour-and-a-half program with different speakers on talking about native plants. So that'll be a good place to go to coming up here real quick. Again, when we get back to doing face-to-face programs, our Wild Ones meetings are always free and open to the public. They're usually on the second Tuesday of every month. So again, sign up for our newsletter and check our website, and you'll see when those are coming up. And in fact, we've had a couple of programs over Zoom. We just started doing this. And those programs are also open to the public and available. So check those out. We just had one we finished a couple of weeks ago. Remember, Ginny and I watched it while we were on vacation up in northern Michigan. And we had a professor from the University of Toledo talking about soils, all the cool organisms in the soils and how important those all are for our plants. And it was pretty amazing. He made it really, really simple for me to understand. So we're going to do some more of those kind of programs. So stay tuned again to Wild Ones. Check out the Sacred Grounds workshop coming up. And also check into the Heather Holm webinar that she's going to do in September.
Thanks, Hal. Yeah, that's perfect. And I just wanted to highlight again a little bit about the upcoming Sacred Grounds webinar. It's open for anyone in the Toledo area. It's open to the general public. So yes, please do join that. It is on August 18th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. We normally do these in person a couple of times a year, but this one will be virtual. And Hal's right, the first 40 people who attend or who sign up for the webinar, not attend, who register for the webinar will receive a $50 native plant voucher to Poppin' Up Natives. And one of the presenters actually will be Cindy Carnicom, who's the owner of Poppin' Up Natives. So we'll be providing information on how you can assess your site, select plants, and then the Sacred Grounds Toledo team is also available to provide some additional information for you. And thank you, Jessica, she's a member of our Sacred Grounds Toledo team. She just posted in the chat box the link to register for that Bringing Nature Home Native Plant webinar on the 18th. So please take a look at that if you're interested. So another question, Hal, are there opportunities for teachers and students to connect with native plant groups?
Oh, absolutely. This is so important to get this into the classroom. I'd say connect with Wild Ones again. And Wild Ones actually has a grant available for schools. It's called the Seeds for Education program. And we've had several of the schools in the Toledo area have won those grants and put in gardens at their schools. So again, I check with Wild Ones on that. I think Wild Ones is really the premier organization for getting education out to the public. Kim just posted some information or a link to the Seeds for Education program.
Excellent, thank you, Hal, that's great. So we don't currently have any additional questions that have come in. Thank you to Kim and Jessica for posting those links in our chat box. So please check out the Seeds for Education link from Kim in the chat, and then again the link from Jessica for the webinar if you're interested in registering for that, and get your registration in soon. You may get $50 of native plants to start your own garden. Anybody else have any additional questions? We're approaching 7 o'clock, so we're gonna wrap up pretty soon here, but please feel free to enter any additional questions into that Q&A box for us.
While they're doing that, I have to tell you that all day long, about every hour, I'd come out and look at the Virginia mountain mint patch, because this morning I found a tiny little insect on the edge of a gray-headed coneflower right next to the Virginia mountain mint. And I didn't notice it was an insect. I thought that was really weird, because here was this gray-headed coneflower with a little white spot on it. And actually what was happening was there was an insect that was actually on the head of the coneflower. And what this insect does is it grabs plant parts and sticks it on its back to camouflage it, so that hopefully no bird that's coming by will or other insect will recognize it as such and grab it as food. After all, 96% of our terrestrial birds eat insects, and most of those insects are eating native plants. So they come up with a lot of various ways to try and keep from getting eaten.
Thank you,
And
Hal.
when I came out last about it, that a little, before we started, the insect was gone. I wanted to show it to you.
Ah, darn. That's still a great story, though.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks. Oh, Hal, are you still there? It looks like your screen. Oh, never mind.
I am. I don't
Okay,
know.
sorry. Your video went off for a second, but I think we're okay. We do have another question. Is it better to grow plants from seeds or from seedlings?
I don't think that's a good question. And I don't think there's a better, that it's better one way or the other. From seeds just takes more patience. If you want to have quicker results, you'll grow from seedlings that you can get. But you can grow a lot of plants from seeds. And in fact, Wild Ones has given away an awful lot of seeds in the past at the annual seed swap. And I don't know if we're going to have that this year. But last year we gave away over 800 packages of seeds to attendees at the annual seed swap. So see if that's going to happen this year.
I would just say, Hal, do you agree that when you start from seedlings or plugs that they mature a bit more quickly, and so sometimes require a little bit less additional care and maintenance at the outset if you start with a slightly larger plant. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good observation. Certainly they mature faster. You're going to get them into bloom faster from seedlings than seed, most likely. Although some plants will grow pretty darn quick, like Black-Eyed Susan will often bloom the first year from seed. I'd say that the seedlings that you put in the ground may need some little care because you're taking them out of an environment that they've been nurtured in and carefully attended for. When you put them into the ground, you're going to need to water them and take care of them until they get established. Whereas by seed, when they germinate directly into the ground, you may have to water them a little bit. You may need to weed them to make sure there isn't competition there that'll override them. But the seeds may actually require less care. When people are putting in prairies or meadows, they'll often use seed to do that because it's economical, and they don't water them or do a whole lot to get that meadow going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Hal. So we're a little after 7 o'clock. I'm thinking that we should probably wrap up in the next minute or two. If anyone has any last minute questions, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A. And I just wanted to say thank you to Hal for providing this wonderful tour of your beautiful garden and all of these fantastic plants and natural history stories along the way. Really wonderful. So thank you, Hal.
Glad to do it. I'm so happy to do it.
Oh, that's great.
There's so many different bee species. You can look at a group of flowering plants and you'll see 5 or 10 different species of bees in there. Some of them are so tiny you don't hardly even notice them. Also, there were often goldfinches out here picking at the seeds off of these plants. So I always enjoy that, seeing there. In fact, there was a goldfinch out here earlier when I first came out.
Well, Hal, I think maybe we should go ahead and sign off. We're a little past 7. I don't see any more
Okay,
questions.
good.
So
People should feel free to contact us if they have any questions. We'll make sure to put you in touch with the right people, get things answered, and just highly encourage you all to grow natives. Get involved in the Sacred Grounds program, attend the webinars, and we'll see you soon.
yes, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and hope to see you maybe on the Bringing Nature Home webinar in August for Sacred Grounds. Have a great evening. Thank you all again. Take care. Thanks, Hal.
Bye.